Well, DevCentral community, it is that time again. It's DevCentral Connects. This is the Security Sidebar show. My name's John, and I am excited to be here with all of you today as we connect, like we always do every Thursday. So I just wanted to give a quick little shout out to my good buddy, Mr. Jason Rahm. Hi, team. Miss you all. It's good to see you out there, Jason. So I hope you're doing well, my friend. And like we always do, we are streaming to YouTube and LinkedIn and Periscope. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, you can put them right there in the little comment, chat area of your favorite streaming channel, whatever. So just like Jason did. So we'll connect with you. We'll interact live here on this show. One thing that I wanted to mention is that next Tuesday, December the 15th, we are going to be hosting a DevCentral trivia experience. So be sure to check that out. Tune in to our YouTube channel at that time as well. Next Tuesday, December 15th, and you'll get to answer or take part in some really cool, fun DevCentral trivia time. So anyway, but hey, today we have a special guest. We have a special topic. It's going to be an amazing time together, and I am honored to be able to talk to a senior threat researcher at F5 Labs, Mr. David Warburton. And F5 Labs, we'll talk about it here in a minute, but they do a lot of research in security threats that are going on around the world. And they have recently published this really cool report that focuses on phishing and fraud and how that whole thing has gone on in the year 2020. So there's been a lot of really interesting trends and patterns and activities in the realm of phishing and fraud. And so with that, I want to bring on my good buddy, Mr. Dave Warburton from F5 Labs. So Dave, it's great to see you here, my friend. Welcome to the Security Sidebar DevCentral Connect show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, John, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I know I just mentioned a second ago that you are you're a senior threat researcher there on the F5 Labs team. Maybe if people have not heard about F5 Labs, you give just a quick word about who Labs is and what you guys do.
Yeah, of course. So we're one of the kind of best kept secrets within F5, which possibly isn't a great thing. We perform independent and vendor, specifically F5 agnostic threat research. So what that means is we're kind of looking at security trends, we're researching breaking news, we work with parts of F5 to provide us with kind of threat data, everyone from the Cert, the Security Operations Center, the Silverline team, Nginx and Shape, but we also work with external partners that help give us data, send us data from the honeypots that they've got, from the phishing and fraud sites that they kind of monitor and collect. And we kind of collect this data. So we're really the kind of data scientists, I suppose, of the kind of threat research world. We analyze a lot of the data, and then we produce these reports, as well as, shorter kind of articles and breaking news stories that we then publish on F5 Labs. And they're free of charge. As I said, they're not specific to F5. They're not specific for F5 customers. Anyone can go along to f5labs.com and download and read the reports.
I love it. So you don't have to be an F5 expert or Nginx or any of that stuff. If you just need to be interested in security, the topic of cybersecurity and all that, threats and
yeah, absolutely. And we write for a kind of wide variety in terms of the audience that we expect to get. So they're not always kind of super detailed and deep dive articles. Some of them are. That some of them will go into a new strain of malware or a new IoT bot, and we'll kind of pull apart the command and control center and how the bot operates. But a lot of the things we do are really designed at people that sit maybe within a kind of CISO or security manager role. So they're very much aware of the responsibilities and what they need to achieve, but they're not always super kind of techie or geeky kind of articles that you need to be a security expert to understand.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. A wide-reaching audience. So that's super cool. So hey, which by the way, just a quick shout out up here, Nathan Britton, who is a fellow across the ponder over there by in the England area. Yep. Hey, John, and hey, Dave. So it's good to see you out there, Nathan Britton, my friend. Awesome, man. I just wanted to shout out to Nathan Britton. Well, hey, so Dave, you've done amazing research on the topic of phishing and fraud, which, by the way, some people may think, hey, phishing, that's, where you get those emails and it's, I'm the Nigerian prince that has $10 million and I need to offload some of it, to you, whatever. So will you please come and do this thing? Click on this link. And some people may think, well, hey, yeah, we've been talking about phishing for forever. Is that still a thing? But my understanding is phishing is definitely still a thing. So maybe give us some insight into that and just tell us a couple of key points about the Phishing and Fraud Report that we might be interested in.
Okay, sure. I think, like you said, I mean, people use the term phishing. We talk about phishing, and it's a bit, well, we know it happens, and we don't necessarily possibly appreciate, how big of a problem it is. And so one of the, statistics and finding we had from the report this year was that actually it's definitely growing. It's growing fairly significantly. We're projecting a 15% year-on-year growth on phishing incidents that we saw compared to last year. There is, of course, the occasional kind of dip and, unexpected, larger than expected kind of growth. But on the whole, we're seeing a significant kind of upward trend. And I think what's telling, and this narrative is really corroborated by other reports from the likes of Rise and the DBIR and the Europol's ARCTA report and many other sources that kind of recognize that phishing is growing because it just works. Right. And it's easier to use, it's frequently a lot easier to send someone a phishing email to get them to click on a link to either enter their credentials or get some malware installed than it is going to be to try and exploit a vulnerability in a website or some other kind of application. Those things are still a significant risk, but actually we're seeing phishing used pretty much across the board from, yes, your kind of everyday, wannabe fraudster that will send, the very poorly kind of worded phishing emails to a huge kind of audience that they've maybe trawled from social media or someone's data breach. But they're also being used increasingly by semi-targeted attacks where someone's going after maybe customers of a specific bank. Okay. But also APTs and nation states, they use it. There have been many reports just over the past year or two. When you dig into it, you realize that, yes, ultimately data was breached by maybe some malware that was installed that exfilled some data out through an unsecured port or what have you. But actually the initial infection vector is almost always phishing. Okay. It's almost always that kind of social engineering, getting someone to enter their credentials and to install some malware onto a device. So it's growing because it just simply works, and that's as simple as it really is.
Yeah. Hey, if it works, then keep using it, right? If you're an attacker. I mean, there's why change threat or attack vectors if the one you're using totally works? Just keep going.
Exactly. And they're very kind of opportunistic as well, I'd say. Attackers, again, it kind of depends on the threat actor and the kind of phishing attack that they're trying to conduct. So you're semi-targeted, possibly. Actually, no, I'd say it kind of is applicable to most of them. They will use some kind of emotive hook to get you, the victim, to kind of lower their guard. And it's usually a combination of factors. There's some kind of emotive hook to get the victim kind of interested and to care about the email they've just received. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, and there've been lots of kind of academic studies on this, and one of the ones that I referenced in our report was conducted a few years ago that looked in terms of, what are the kind of psychological methods that attackers are using. Mm-hmm. And authority and urgency are two of the most popular. So if you can make your email look like it's come from someone in a position of authority or some kind of official body, mm-hmm. Make it look as if they need to react quickly, otherwise something will expire or they'll miss out on something. Yep. They know that it's going to get the victim to lower their guard. They may not analyze an email as analytically and as thoroughly as maybe they should do. So, perfect example, with a huge pandemic that we're all still struggling with, when lots of nations start going into various kind of lockdown periods, I think I've got a little graph here that I can share.
Yeah, here, I'll pull that up. That's fantastic.
So we actually saw a huge spike in the amount of phishing activities that were happening, which really kind of very closely coincided with those lockdown periods. So it was around about, February, March time when lots of people were being told to work from home and to isolate. We saw, at its worst, a 220% increase on the kind of yearly average of phishing incidents. So attackers really are kind of latching on to anything that's kind of current and topical.
Yeah, and it's certainly the coronavirus pandemic is current and topical, and it's going to engage those emotions that you talked about. If I'm in this heightened state of anxiety or fear or nervous, whatever, that, hey, something's going to expire, or I'm going to, my boss, it's really important, just sent me a note or whatever. Then yeah, you're gonna lose. You're not gonna be on guard as much. So yeah, coronavirus is just a perfect, atmosphere for an attacker to capitalize on that. So, and obviously they did and have been doing that.
They did, yeah. And one of the other things we'll be looking at is one of the easy ways to kind of track it is using something called certificate transparency logs, which is a bit of a kind of crypto and TLS nerd I love to search and play around with. But they're essentially like the blockchain of digital certificates. So whenever you go and create a new website and you want a certificate for it, really now any certificate authority has to enter a log entry of that new certificate being created. So the CT logs, as they call it, are quite useful tool for researchers and organizations to just go and see who's creating certificates from what CAs and what names are being used. And as you might be able to see from the graph, we saw a huge kind of spike in terms of the number of certificates that were being created for setting up sites that had either COVID or coronavirus in the title. Wow. Now, some of these, granted, are going to be genuine sites, but we know that, from also scanning a huge number of known phishing domains, we know that a significant proportion of these were malicious.
Yeah. Wow. So people are capitalizing on that, and it's so they're kind of preemptively setting the stage so that then they can send a phishing mail, and then as the victim you go to this HTTPS secure site, but it's a coronavirus phishing kind of attempt. So wow, that's fascinating. Good to go. Well, I tell you what, one of the things that I'm curious about, just as we look over, as you have dug into the whole phishing world and fraud world, do you have any interesting examples of an actual phish, email or whatever that's that kind of caught your attention? You're like, hey, that was a pretty good one right there.
I think what is standing out to me is not one specific kind of email, because one thing that I generally noticed, when writing, performing the analysis and writing up the report, is there were some emerging tactics, and we can maybe kind of go into those in a moment, actually. Sure. New trends, new things that attackers are trying to do. But by and large, phishing is very much this year like an evolution. There's no kind of huge revolutionary kind of tactic. Emails specifically are generally getting better. The phishing sites that you might be sent to look better. And there's a couple of ways that attackers can do this. One is simply cloning a website. So one method that they've used for a long time is to simply go to the valid website, effectively right-click and save the page, modify a few HTML tags and the destination of form objects and so on. And hey presto, they've got pretty much a ready built page ready to go. Yeah. But we've also seen an increasing use of phishing kits, and they're particularly nasty because it actually what phishing kits really do is lower the barrier of entry for a lot of attackers. So it makes it much easier for the non-phishing expert, if you like, to go and launch their own phishing campaign. They can go and find a phishing kit. They can pay a few dozens of dollars to buy this phishing kit, and it comes ready-made, mocking or emulating the kind of the victim that they want to go and attack effectively. A common one is pretty much always Office 365. We see other targets. Amazon was, I think, for the second year running, one of the most popular targeted kind of brands. But Office 365 is as well, and it's probably no surprise. There are so many enterprises putting not just email, but almost their entire back office, network and systems and data into Office 365. That if an attacker can get those Office.com credentials, they haven't got just access to your email. They've got potentially access to sensitive documents and internal systems, and heavens forbid that they actually get the credentials of an administrator, and potentially they can get in and start actually reconfiguring systems.
Right. No, but you're right though. Once you get into like an Office 365, like if someone were to steal my credentials on that, let's say, they're in my email, they're in any kind of Office documents, Word or PowerPoint or whatever. Maybe there's some sensitive information in that, or if you've got like OneDrive turned on for file sharing, or Teams, you could start to chat on behalf of someone. That'd be
and one of the most common tactics actually is to not necessarily start stealing data. Ultimately they will go through an inbox and start seeing what is in the inbox, but quite often the attacker will just use that that Office 365 mailbox as a launch point to launch other emails, now with the added benefit of those new phishing emails coming from a real internal inbox. So won't even have that kind of flag that we quite often get in emails now. A lot of enterprises are using that might mark at the top of the email that it's come from an external source. Now these are all coming from internal sources and are that much more likely to be trusted.
Yeah. Once you're in like that, you might as well. I mean, because then you're right, you're trusted. So yeah, it's fascinating. One really quick, I was going to tell just a really quick personal story on a fish thing, and maybe I thought of you the other day. I just happened to be in the market for looking for a new car, or just new to me, and not necessarily brand new, but there's a certain kind of car I was looking for, and I happened to see on a website the car. And it was exactly what I was looking for, and it was a really good price. And so I sent the person a message saying, "Hey, is this thing still available?" Whatever. And then they send one back, and they said, "Hey, I'm actually selling this on behalf of my sister, and so here's her email address, and you could go contact her, whatever." So I was like, "All right, fair enough." So I sent a quick email off to the sister. And then got one back quickly, and she said it was, I say she, I don't think it was an actual she. Anyway, she's like, "Yeah, hey, my husband just died. I had to move my family to a different state, and we're just trying to get rid of a few of his personal belongings, and kind of clean all that up, whatever. But here's some additional pictures of the car if you want to check those out that are attached to this email." I did not open those up though, Dave. You'd be proud of me. But then it was this whole deal about, "Hey, I'll ship you the car, but you have to pay for the shipping, or you got to pay me some escrow amount or whatever. And then if you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, we can get it shipped back, blah, blah, blah." So anyway, it fairly quickly, it became obvious that this was a scam. Yeah. But I thought, well, that's a pretty interesting, innovative way to just put something out there on, in this case, a car selling kind of a place. And then if nothing else, as I inquire about it, and they offer to give me more pictures of the car, then those could be riddled, of course, with malware as an attachment to an email. But I'm gonna have just my curiosity is going to be like, "Hey, I want to see more pictures of this car that I'm interested in," right?
Yeah, I think people
your guard. Yeah,
people are just generally by nature trustworthy, I think, and scammers, phishers, even serious and seasoned attackers and nation states know it. They know that people are generally trustworthy. They want to believe the best, and they kind of prey on it, and they benefit from it. It amazes me with mentioning emails specifically. I don't pretend to necessarily have a great solution, not yet, but it just amazes me still how much of a problem emails are, and I think a big part of it isn't just the fact that we have pretty formatted HTML emails which can hide the kind of true link of where you're going. That's certainly a big problem. We commonly talk to staff and maybe even family members, make sure you hover your mouse above the link before you click on it. But actually, one of the bigger problems, I think, is that so many third-party domains are being used by services now. It's almost impossible to tell what is a genuine domain and what isn't. I mean, Microsoft used hundreds and hundreds of different domains. I got an email from OneDrive the other day saying that lots of files have been deleted. If I don't go and look at them and recover them, I might lose them. Now, this email was genuine, but that is a very common kind of scam, a very common phishing tactic. Again, it's playing on that element of urgency. If you don't go here, you're going to lose something. But hovering over the link to see if it was genuine showed me a domain of something like, I think it was svc.ms, which is genuine in this case, but to the average user, to the average consumer, would mean absolutely nothing at all.
No, have no idea. But it's like you said, they kind of prey on those emotions, like, "Hey, if you don't take this action quickly, then you're going to lose all your files or whatever." It's kind of it reminds me of those old television, whatever. The programs where they're trying to sell different things, the channels or whatever, where they'll say, "Hey, act now, and then you can get the extra set of knives for free, but you have to call immediately." It's that same emotion that they're tapping into, right?
Yeah, no, completely. And I mean, talking about speed, I'm going to use that as a cheeky segue. To mention, you asked before about some of the kind of newer and emerging things that I'd kind of seen that were interesting. And one thing that was definitely caught my attention, it was working with some of the Shape security researchers, actually, was their their work in researching what we call real-time phishing proxies, because typically phishing sites get set up and they can last, in some cases, they can last months if they're not particularly heavily visited or if they don't catch the attention of someone. But typically phishing domains, phishing sites last days to possibly even hours. But typically, if a site's up for days or weeks, the attacker will send as many victims as they can to it. They'll collect they'll harvest the credentials. And then once they've got credentials, it then allows them to go on credential stuffing kind of sprees. They'll spray those passwords across dozens, hundreds, thousands of sites, seeing which passwords match and seeing where they can go in. But generally, you might say that you've got days or weeks after you realize you're being phished to maybe change passwords or inform your bank or what have you. But with real-time phishing proxies, what's really interesting is that the attacker will effectively sit on that attacking site. On the phishing site acts as a proxy. So they're sitting on this phishing site as the victim is interacting with it. And what will happen is the victim will enter their credentials, and this phishing site will then immediately submit those credentials to the genuine backend site, whether it be a bank or retailer. And what that enables the attacker to do then is actually intercept things like multi-factor authentication codes, which is usually our biggest kind of go-to in terms of recommendations for protecting accounts, protecting passwords. Because all they need to do is they will see the message from the real website saying, please, can we have your two-factor code? Well, they just present the same message to the victim. The victim enters their two-factor code into the phishing site. Because the attacker sat there in real time, they can then submit that to the backend site, almost immediately. So it's certainly not the norm. That's certainly not the predominant type of phishing site that we see, but it's definitely a kind of growing risk because if nothing else, it really thwarts the protection that multi-factor gives in a lot of cases. But it also massively reduces the time that we have to react. Once we realize we've been phished, it may already be too late to do anything about it.
Well, and I remember, if I remember right, in the report, you talked about credit card like theft or fraud or whatever, and on average, the time between when a credit card credentials or number whatever is stolen and it is used then fraudulently is like 4 hours, if I remember that right. And
it's
not very long, right?
No, it's not, exactly. And that's with a traditional kind of phishing site. So even with a traditional phishing site, you've still potentially got hours to react. That was really interesting. That was something that we're able to to dig into purely because of the way that kind of shapes sit in front of this customer protect them. They were able to submit their own kind of dummy fake credentials and then track in the back end, so to speak, exactly when they saw those come through. So it was really fascinating to kind of see that work. Little test, throw something out there and then watch it, kind of trail it. Because it's not often that we kind of get to be proactive when it comes to security research. Quite often we're collecting data in bulk and we're analyzing it, and it's kind of very retrospective, looking back on this attack or looking back over the past year. But again, with something like working with a Shape team where they kind of get to interact with the phishing site and see the results, it's a lot more proactive. It's definitely a lot more kind of real time, ironically, than some of the research that we do.
I'll tell you, the Shape team is amazing. Those guys are they do great work. So and but on that whole credit card thing, sometimes for me personally, I think about, all right, we've got phishing issues, we've got fraud, and I want to know like what I can do to maybe I can't even stop it, or maybe I can in some cases, like this whole car thing, like, hey, I'm not going to click those, the pictures of the car, I'm not going to click on that or whatever. But beyond that, I'm thinking, if my credit card gets stolen through some kind of phishing thing, whatever, and, within 4 hours, maybe if it's even real time, it's going to be used somewhere, then I think about things like, hey, I need to be checking my credit card statement often, right? So as to minimize, like, kind of remediate, keep the fence around the damage that's going to be done here. So anyway, I think about those kinds of things. So there's some things that you might recommend for like the average user like myself on, hey, I know not to click on a link or open an attachment or whatever, but some other practical kind of tips.
Definitely. I mean, there's in the report I list lots actually for kind of enterprises, because there's certainly there's so many different vectors and things to think about from an enterprise point of view, both protecting the kind of staff, as well as kind of, the end users, the customers on the outside. But I kind of use the NIST cybersecurity framework to kind of plan a very kind of proactive, and it's a lot of the kind of recommendations I give for an enterprise are very procedural and to do with the human and the kind of social interaction. They're not all kind of technical solutions. But for the consumer, there are a couple of things. I mean, personally, I'm a big fan of the kind of credit cards or any kind of payment card, which is tied to an app on your phone that then alerts you as soon as it's used. Because you'll then get you won't necessarily have to go and log onto your bank and trawl through a report, which might be, or a statement which might be hours or days old. You quite often get an immediate kind of transaction notification, which is great. Lots of those now offer things like virtual disposable credit cards. So as soon as that card's used, the number and expiry date and so on is trashed and a brand new one's created. Doesn't stop that first use, that first kind of fraudulent misuse of the card, but it will stop it being subsequently, sold and reused on the dark web or having thousands of other dollars kind of taken from the card.
It's like it limits it to just one, though, right? And in that specific case, what you're talking about, and sometimes these fraudsters, they will say, "Hey, let me throw in like a $1 charge just to make sure it works."
Right, exactly.
So if that's what they're doing, then you're only out $1, and a lot of these credit card companies are gonna, not make you pay for all this stuff as well. But that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, quite often, if you're using credit cards versus debit cards, quite often they will protect you, but you still have a lot of people go through the stress and the heartache of actually going through trying to get them refunded. But a big one I like to recommend, and it's definitely not one for absolutely everybody, but I'm a big fan of password managers for lots of reasons. One, they can help generate really long, really secure passwords that additionally are unique for every site you go to. And we've been saying for a long time now that one of the most important factors with good password hygiene is just having different passwords on every single site you go to. But one of the big benefits from a phishing point of view, which I love with password managers, is that a lot have the ability to autofill your username and password when you go to that site. So if I were to go to mybank.com, it should automatically fill in my user ID and my password. But if I get sent to myphishingbank.com, although I may not pay attention to the address bar, or I might be distracted and not see where I'm actually going, the password manager is looking at the domain very closely and will only offer to autofill those credentials when you're on the valid site. So that can be another good prompt to really double check where you're going to. Yeah.
See, now that right there, David Warburton, that is like real practical stuff that we can use. That's awesome. And that's, you think about Password Manager, exactly what you said. It's nice because it remembers my password for me. I don't have to. That's the big problem. People reuse their password because they can't remember 1,000 different passwords. But that what you just said, though, that it is looking at the actual domain name that is supposed to be there. And so, if instead of mybanking.com, it's mybanking.net or myfraudbanking.com or whatever, it's not going to autofill. And that can be a little prompt in your mind like, hey, hey, my password manager didn't just prompt autofill this thing. So there's something going on, right?
Yeah, completely. And unfortunately, there's always a human involved. And I've myself been guilty of sometimes thinking, it's not working. Why isn't it working? Well, I'll manually copy and paste the password into it. So you're still going to be on your guard, but it adds another layer, which I like.
I love it. Yeah, as many layers as we can do. Right. I mean, you don't want to add crazy layers, but but it's good to have the protection in place.
Yeah.
So that's good stuff. So, hey, really quick, a couple of quick questions, and I'm also afraid we're almost out of time. This time, Dave Warburton, man, time flies. Talking to an F5 senior threat researcher. So a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to give a shout out really quick to Vishnu. Hi from India. Thank you for watching from India. We love our viewers in India. That's awesome. Thanks for staying up late at night. So it's good to see you. By the way, Sarah Body chimed in on that little card story I was telling about. She's like, send us all the headers and all the stuff on the email. We'll dig into that thing, right?
We do actually. It's a good point. Here at Labs, we're always kind of keen to hear stories. And, if anyone's got, whether it's research ideas or stories or want to share anything, then we're always open to kind of interact with customers and non-customers alike. So absolutely. Send us all the details you can.
All the stuff. Yeah. Just kind of keep an eye on that. That's awesome. One other one, Technical Scoop, watching from the Netherlands. It's great to see you out there. Technical Scoop. Glad you're joining us. Leaf Zimmerman said plus 100 for password managers. Good on you, Leaf Zimmerman. Most people just say plus 1. Leaf Zimmerman says plus 100, right? So that's awesome, man. Hey, and then one quick question though I wanted to get at is Sky out there. So Sky, good to see you. hi, can it validate the cert on the website as well? So I think they're talking about maybe that password manager conversation.
I'm going to maybe kind of leave everyone with one last graph, which is it's a bit of a pet peeve. It's not so. The likes of Let's Encrypt and all the certificate authorities that now provide free certificates, generally a very, very good thing. We shouldn't be going to insecure websites at all. But what it does mean is that we're getting to the point that almost every single website we're going to, it's 90% of genuine websites, around 72% now we found in this report of malicious phishing sites, and 100% of drop zones use encryption with valid certificates. So just looking for that padlock, looking for HTTPS isn't enough. We can't tell people anymore to just look for that padlock. We've really got to tell them to be extra vigilant when it comes to the domain, the actual domain that they're going to. Okay.
Yeah. Which, you used to, which I'll clarify this, and you can verify as well. It is still good to look for the padlock. You still want the encryption, but you can't solely rely on that. You can't say, oh, okay, I see the little padlock in my little URL bar, address bar, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As I said, we don't really ever want to be browsing to insecure sites, but there's still an awful lot of phishing and security training within, both within enterprises and within, large bodies like banks that educate their customers. One of the main bits of advice is to look for the padlock, and it just isn't enough anymore. It absolutely should be there, but we can't rely on it.
Yeah, it's not the silver bullet that does it all, right? So. Right. It's just one of the pieces. Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And Dave, I tell you what, man, like I said, the time has flown by, but we are at time here today. So I just want to say thank you for sharing with me and with everyone, all the details of the Phishing and Fraud Report and some of these practical tips. I think that's a really, really nice takeaway to do some of the things that you talked about here, that we can say, hey, phishing and fraud, it is a big problem, but we can take little steps that are not that hard, and we can help fight back against this thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
It's been brilliant. Thanks for having me. If anyone wants to find out more, go to f5labs.com and download the whole report.
Download the whole report. Read the entire thing, man. You'll never be the same. It's a page turner. You just can't put the thing down. That's awesome. Well, Dave, I'm going to say thank you and bid you farewell, my friend. And I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, everyone. Well, Dave Warburton, what a great senior threat research, researcher there at F5 Labs. I really appreciate him being on. And thank you to all of you for spending time with us today here on DevCentral Connects. So Vishnu, I just want to say thank you so much. It's awesome to see you again. Pedro, we see you out there. Hi and thanks. And Evalu, thank you as well. Jason Rom came back. I love my password manager. Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Well, hey, thanks so much to all of you for connecting with us here on DevCentral Connects. We'll be back next Thursday, 12:30 Pacific, as we always are. So thanks again for being the greatest community in the world. And it's the greatest because of all of you, the DevCentral members. So thanks for being here. It's great to see all of you. And we will see you all out there in the community. Thanks so much.